question for the host. Okay. Hello, everyone. For those that don't know me, my name's Chris Gregg. I'm a senior research scientist in the Andlinger Centre for Energy and the Environment and the Associate Director for External Partnerships. To begin, I'd like to thank the Andlinger Centre, but also the Centre for Policy Research in Energy and Environment and the Julius Rubinowitz Centre for Public Policy and Finance for co-sponsoring this event. And it is my absolute pleasure to introduce a colleague and friend with whom I've had the opportunity to work with increasingly over recent years, Dr. Maryam Golnaraghi. Maryam is the director of, she has a very long bio and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but she's the Director of Climate Change and the Environment at the Geneva Association. And I think of the Geneva Association as the official think tank for the global insurance industry. Her career spans 25 years, pioneering, leading, and implementing initiatives in climate risk management and decarbonisation. During her impressive career, she's worked in senior executive roles for the private sector and at the United Nations. She's also founded and mentored climate sector startups and served on various boards and advisory committees in both the private and public sector. She has a PhD in physical oceanography and an MS in applied physics from Harvard and a Bachelor of Science in chemical engineering from Cornell University. So it's without any more ado, I'm going to give you the stage and thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you. It is absolutely a pleasure to be here. I want to thank the host for the opportunity. I always cherish the opportunity of bringing industry perspectives into universities for two reasons. One is I am a big fan of cross-sectoral collaboration. And as part of the work that I've done throughout my entire career, that has been founded on bringing different stakeholders together to think about the issues from different perspectives. That's the only way we can find the solutions. And then the second one is I am passionate about students and graduates who have to find their way into the real world. So I invest significant amount of my time, whether it is mentoring or bringing graduates as interns or talking to them, because there are some big challenges out there and you need to be equipped to, as you embark on your careers, to be aware of it and prepare yourself. So those are the two reasons that proudly and with pleasure brings me to Princeton. So thank you again. What I'm going to talk about is a role of insurance in how we are going to accelerate towards a more climate resilient and decarbonized economy. My deck is very dense, and I did that intentionally because I'm going to leave it behind, right? First I came up with one of these sexy presentations, only titles, and then I talk and I'm like, nah, you know, they're going to be left with not enough substance. So this deck is designed so you can, if any of this interests you, you can take it, look at some of the key references, and you can dig into it. So it will be dense, but I'm not going to go word by word in the slides. As I talk about things, I'm just going to highlight things that I want to leave behind with you. Okay, not everything. You have the presentation afterwards. So what I'm going to talk about is there is a, you know, I don't think the world really understands what insurance industry is. Well, I started understanding it because throughout my career, I never worked in the industry, by the way, so just to be clear, but I came upon it as an enabler and catalyzer over and over and over again. So what I do right now, I was hired 8 years ago by a platform of CEOs of the industry to help this massive industry, this massive enabler, to find its path into how we can do more towards building the next economy. So everything that we do at the Geneva Association has never been done before. We are working at the forefront of new ideas and new developments. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to talk two case studies. One, interface of insurance and extreme weather and how we are managing that. I'm sure you have read in Wall Street Journal and Financial Times and others that how insurance industry abandoned homeowners against protection of fire. But I'm going to take you through the real story and what the issues are and what we are doing about it. And then the next one is something I'm so deeply proud of, is how we can expedite projects in emerging climate technologies, green hydrogen, industrial geothermal, carbon removal storage, et cetera, to expedite scaling deployment of these technologies. So I'm going to be real discussion on the ground and what is happening, how so insurance industry is innovating, working cross-sectorally with others. And then what's next? Things that I am going to be focusing in the next 2-3 years. And part of why I'm here is I'm here to see if there are opportunities for collaboration. Let's be very upfront with that. So I had to show this off. This is the board of Geneva Association. If you look at the companies are among the largest companies in the world. I work directly with these gentlemen and a couple of women, but I also work with the remaining 80 other CEOs. Launched in 1973, precisely to look at how insurance can help enable, catalyze economic development. It was launched by the president of France, who was a former CEO of one of the largest French insurance companies. 90 CEOs. What's important is that it has property and casualty insurance. So, you know, your car, your home, your industrial project infrastructure versus life and health. You know, insuring you against any risk for your health and life. The companies of these 90 CEOs together manage over 24 trillion of assets. So I have my eye on that, right? I want to see how I can help facilitate this money into investing into transitions on the ground, right? Now, what do we do at Geneva Association? We work through industry collaboration and cross-sectoral partnership to find innovative solutions in risk management and investing. So my focus is risk management and investing in the area of climate change and environment, okay? And I'm going to use two examples of how we are making that happen. Now, about insurance industry. Just show of hand, how many of you know really what insurance industry is? Great. So let's see if I can add any more to what the insurance industry is. Not the broker who comes and sells you car insurance or sells you your home insurance. It's a much bigger machinery. Obviously, it starts now. I want to see how I can use. Is there a pointer here? Oh, here we go. So obviously, first and foremost, the idea is, can we protect people, businesses, and government against certain events? Can be a range of events. And who are the main contenders in that are doing it? There are insurance company, primary insurance company, State Farm, Chubb, Allianz, all of that, and reinsurance companies. They are the ones that actually insure the insurance companies, right? So you face, your policies with primary insurance companies, but then primary insurance companies can manage some of that risk, and they need to transfer some of that risk on their balance sheet. So they go to reinsurance companies, but that's not the only way. They also use financial markets to pass on some of that risk. So the foundation of it is they collect all that risk and they transfer it away from you. And the whole basis of it is when they write that risk for many people that share the same risk, the assumption is that that risk is not going to happen at the same time. If they are underwriting a car insurance against 5,000 people, all those 5,000 are not going to have a car accident at the same time. So they collect the premium, they invest it so that they can build their capital for good liquidity. And then as these accident happens, they need to have enough in their bucket to be able to pay. That's a foundation, okay? So I want you to remember a few things when I talk through my thing. One is these companies are packed with experts. And these experts are risk management experts, a lot of expertise in data and analytics, a lot of expertise in risk engineering, expertise in underwriting, how to price risk and underwrite it. And then they are the second largest investors in the world after pension funds, right? So nobody talks about that, but actually second largest investors. Type of insurance, you think about commercial versus retail. Commercial is insuring businesses, industrial plants, etc., versus retail, insuring you and I. Property and casualty versus life. I mentioned that. Public versus private. Insurance can be delivered through the market, through insurance companies, but when the risk is so high, it might be carried only through government as a backstop or through public-private partnerships, okay? And then what is the core business of an insurer? Transferring risk, I explained that. Now, in the P&C world, there are annual contracts. So, I insure my home, every year I have to renew it. Same thing for commercial, industrial, but then life insurance is long-term. So you have to understand how this contract works. And then there are enabler and catalysts. By removing risk from people, projects, and government, they enable certain economic or development activity. Okay. Now, first example I'm going to talk about, it's something that has made a lot of headlines, which is managing risk of floods and wildfires. I live on the West Coast. My insurance rates has gone sky high. Why? Let's try to unpack that. This is, by the way, a topic of a major research project I'm leading right now through partnering with government and a number of others. And if this is a topic of interest, happy to share that with you. Okay, so in the industry, when we think about risk, we think about hazard. So the various the tropical cyclones, earthquakes, we call those primary hazards because when they happen, they impact a lot of people. Versus secondary hazards, which are more localized, floods, wildfires, hail, tornadoes. But those are called hazards. And we know through the scientific community and work of IPCC and many more that the characteristics of these hazards are changing, right, with respect to that. So that's the hazard part. But actually, what's driving all the losses in the society, it's not just because frequency and severity of these hazards are changing and rising. It's actually more socioeconomic driven by exposure, where and how we are building. So over the years, we have developed ourselves in a way that we have brought people and asset into highest risk zones. The way we are urbanizing by flattening, a lot of nature and so on, which is designed to filter and to sort of reduce risk of extreme events by building sort of hard pavements, water, So in the way that we have not only built our assets, but we have changed the landscape, right? Urbanization, aging infrastructure. When an aging infrastructure fails, there are a lot of rippling effects and impacts and so on. So when we think about risk, we need to think about data for hazards, for exposure and vulnerability. And traditionally, what we've done is we've looked backwards. We've collected data on all these hazards. We have collected data on losses of damages or destruction of homes and infrastructure. But I think what we've learned is past, while it might be a good sort of indicator of damages, may not be a good indicator of what we're going to expect in the future because these are changing. So let me show you some numbers. So this is essentially global insured losses from weather-related extremes as you see. And what I have here, earthquakes, weather-related losses, and you see that with weather-related losses, they are on the rise. So essentially, when you reflect over the last 5 decades, these risks have been multiplied by 5 times. They have really grown. Now, when you look at the total economic losses versus insured losses, not everything is insured, right? When you look at that through the last, so many decades, you see that if the dark green is insured losses, the light green, this is very sensitive. The light green is uninsured losses. The combination of that are economic losses. So in fact, insured losses are only 1/3 of total economic losses. So much of our assets are not insured. Why? Even this is in the markets that insurance is available, accessible, and affordable. The reason for that is many people don't buy insurance because lack of risk awareness. We constantly buy in high flood risk zones, in high, but we don't know what we are buying. We don't know what the risks are. Nobody has told us what are the risks of these hazards to our homes. Underestimation of potential impacts. Oh, it's not going to happen to me. Reliance on post-disaster aid. That is one of the reasons what flood insurance program in the United States is not getting traction, because they say, oh, if a flood happens, the government will come to my rescue. And then lack of culture of risk management. So there are many reasons why we are not buying insurance, even if it's available and affordable. Now, these are the tricky perils. And they are local. So what we call them non-peak or secondary, what we've seen is over the last decade, accumulated risk associated with floods, wildfires, severe convective storms, and perils such as drought and heat waves is on the rise. And what insurance industry is seeing, even if individually, on a case-by-case, the insured loss is not so big, they are happening so often and in so many places that accumulation of this risk is starting to show seriously on the balance sheet. So, and this is just a curve showing the peak perils, which are the perils I showed you, the localized and accumulation versus non-peak perils, earthquakes and hurricanes and so on. Now, bear in mind, in all this analysis, the insurance industry only looks at direct risk. How this peril, how this hazard has damaged or destroyed an asset. What we are not including in these losses, they're underestimated. What we are not including is business interruption and other impact from things like damage or destruction of infrastructure, from a dam. The dam breaks, on top of other things, supply chain interruptions, rippling effect of business interruptions. Now, there are also compounding effects. If you reflect on the 2022 extreme heat in Europe, we started with extreme heat, and then before you know it, it became a major energy security for Europe combined with the Ukraine invasion and other things. So there is compounding effects that all of a sudden supply and demand for energy completely changed over a very short period of time, and it became almost catastrophic, which led to very fast reactions in certain areas. So we are not really looking at these risks and resilience of infrastructure, their failure and their impacts and so on. So that's that. Now, but that's not the only way. I'm interested in the transition. And one of the direct impact of mismanagement of extreme weather risk has been in project finance for renewables. Very recently, US government called and said, hey, Maryam, we're trying to attract insurance capacity to these projects in United States. solar projects, about 3 billion we are going to put loans in, but the projects are not attracting insurance. Why? Because the projects were not designed for hail risk. Okay, these were going to be deployed in many regions with hail risk. That's what hail does to a solar project. So as the industry has seen occurrence of this over and over, industry started working with manufacturers of solar panels, and there is now 2 new types of solar panels, very thick ones that they can stand, or the ones that you can turn vertical. But what's the problem? In project finance, they're not being implemented because that makes projects very expensive. These are expensive equipment. And so the debate that we are having right now, more expensive project versus no project, after you've invested so much in design of the project. So the new dialogue that we have started in the industry is the need for rethinking project finance by bringing a lot of these considerations from pre-site selection. Where you're going to build, what are the long-term projection of hazards in that region, and how do you actually work with your EPCs, engineering, procurement, construction companies, to incorporate that into the design of the project from equipment and other risk mitigation, so that when you get to financial investment decision, you not only have designed an engineering sound project, but also an insurable project. No insurance, no finance, no project, no transition. Simple as that. So, okay, so let me now tell you about the dialogue. Oh my God, I'm almost done with my time. But so this one I'm going to tell you just as a story. A year ago, if you opened Financial Times and Wall Street Journal, the message was, these damn insurers have left the market, leaving policyholders stranded. They want to charge a lot of money, and they are leaving because their profitability is at risk. Okay? Because that happened. You know, in California and Florida, with rising risk, in the absence of risk mitigation, the risk went up. Insurance premium pricing is risk-based. The higher the risk, the higher the premium. So insurance companies, by the way, deeply regulated. In other words, they cannot enter a state and leave a state at their heart's content, right? They're deep. If you enter a state, you're not going to be able to leave fast. You can offload 2% of your portfolio every year. So the company started offloading that 2% because they said, I cannot deliver with these capping of the prices by the regulators. So, okay, I'm going to get out of this market. No, insurer wants to get out of the market because you lose sort of market, your market size and market penetration. So the narrative was, about a year ago, insurers are leaving, everybody's stranded, and so on. 6 months ago, the conversation started to change because all of a sudden, the governors, the insurance regulator, they are starting to think, yeah, I cannot get insurance for all these communities that have burned or have been flooded. What am I going to do? Studies have shown that in those states where insurers are leaving, homeowners are defaulting. This is starting to ripple into the mortgage market. Look at a study by Harvard Business School, Columbia, and the Treasury. And the conversation started to shift. What is the focus of the conversation? Risks have not been adequately reflected in the valuation of our homes. We are building homes in places we shouldn't build, right? And then we expect the government and insurance company to pay for the risk that you're willing to take. But who is allowing you to build is the local government. Okay, so secondly is insurance premiums, even though they have risen by about 30% in the last 5-6 years, still are underestimated by 30%. So if insurance premium truly reflect the risk that we've accumulated in these regions, it has to be much higher. Importance of reducing risk, things that we can take measure at a home level, community level, whatever to reduce the risk, right? And then now the attention is going to the banks. So I'm coming from DC with a big conversation with SEC, Treasury, insurance regulators just yesterday. And now, not only in the United States, in Canada, and increasingly in Europe, the regulators, the financial regulators, are going to the banks and saying, when you are deciding on issuing a mortgage, are you doing assessment of risk of weather on that property? And are you talking to insurance? Because insurance is a requirement for the mortgage, right? In Canada, OSFI, which is the Office of Superintendent for Financial Institutions, is now putting a mandatory requirement to Canadian banks to report on how they are assessing extreme weather event on their mortgage portfolios. How are they managing their own risks? And are they talking to insurers? Because look, you get a 20 to 30-year mortgage, insurance is annual. So year 1, you can get it because it's required. Year 2, you can get it. 3, 4, 5. By year 10, maybe either the insurance prices are so high or insurance pull out. So what is going to happen after year 10? So in Canada, actually, OSFI is asking the banks, to what extent are you working with insurance on reflection of these, projection of these risks looking 10, 20 years ahead? This is where science comes into it. This is where data comes into it, okay? So the conversation is changing. And by the way, another conversation is this is not a financial crisis problem. 2%, the latest studies have shown that 2% of the $50 trillion US, I hope I put trillion, yeah, dollar US housing sector is at risk. So this is not, world is not going to break loose. We're not going to have a 2008 financial crisis. But for those 2% and who are managing it and financing, it's going to be a problem. So how we manage it. So that's the conversation that evolved 6 months ago. And what's the conversation yesterday? And that is about, we need to come up with an all-of-a-society approach to managing risk, from local governments that should not allow building in high-risk zone, to land zoning, to building codes, to things that homeowner communities can do to reduce, what local government can do for management of forests, fires, et cetera, et cetera. The conversation is changing. So I'm going to now skip over all of it. I just wanted to make sure that you are left with it. I'm actually leading a major initiative in this. This initiative brings insurers, banks, regulators, and government in the risk management category around 7 jurisdictions, US, Canada, 3 jurisdictions in Europe with very high risk, Australia, around the table to look at these issues and really find the solutions ahead. If you're interested, get in touch with me. This is my next passion. I've finished it, finished phase 1, and phase 2 is starting. But let's now talk about that, and I guess I have 20 minutes to cover this. How do we expedite projects for emerging technologies that are very risky? Green hydrogen, as I said, industrial geothermal, carbon capture, storage, modular nuclear, all those great stuff that you guys as engineers, as members of the centers, that you're working on the ground. My interest is on the ground. How am I going to finance this? How am I going to manage the risk? How am I going to that? No, I'm not going to do it. We are going to do it. How? How are we going to do it? So let's talk about that. This is based on an intense 2-year collaboration that has brought leadership of insurance industry. In other words, when I say leadership, companies that want to transform the way things have done in the past, US Department of Energy, across the department, not just one division or another. Breakthrough Energy, which I'm sure you're familiar with, this is chaired by Bill Gates. It's the largest private investor in climate tech, but they're also getting money from various sources. HSBC City from banking, Worley, what I call one of the most progressive engineering and construction, and a whole range of experts. This was painful, but it produced results on the ground. We are already operational. We're already doing it. Let me show you how. So my focus was on 7 industries that are essential, but very energy intensive. So we started with these industries. These are insurers' clients. So as they decarbonize, their business model is going to change. They're going to have new insurance needs. So think about that and how, as an insurer in an insurance industry, we can expedite, we can incentivize, we can promote this change. These are some numbers. So, there's a lot of work is happening through World Economic Forum and other things. And this comes out of an initiative that came out of World Economic Forum, but became independent, okay? And this is a group of companies from all these key sectors that sat together and thought about, okay, if I really want to transition and meet the global targets, what needs to happen in my sector by 2030, and then there's 2050. So let's stay real on the ground a few years from now and look at the numbers. If we are at those numbers in 2024, look at where we need to be in 2030. This came out of industry. It didn't come out of academia proposing to the industry or government telling the industry. This came out of an industry group. So some of those numbers is, pretty appalling. From 0.24 to 40, from 49 to 700. And where are we now? 2024. So what you get out of this, that there is definite sense of urgency. Okay, how was I able to convince 90 CEOs of an industry that has to be risk averse to try to think about disrupting the way we are doing? So what we are seeing in our industry, there are 7 critical developments that makes the star align. So we can get in and be transformative. We are seeing the signals. First signal comes out of the fact that major economies have already written, they have issued their critical materials strategy. Countries like US, Canada, Australia, the whole European Union, they want to now get their hands on sources of where critical materials for building a lot of these technologies are coming. We want oil and gas until that, but we now need to start digging for all those materials. That came out. Secondly, what I call transformative public policy and government subsidies. I think US led on that with the IRA, with the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, and with the CHIPS Act. And what was special about US compared to the Green Deal of Europe, whatever, a lot of that money was channeled into Department of Energy, and Department of Energy almost transformed overnight from a research entity to a commercialization entity. When you look at who actually is leading, DOE. There are coalitions and alliances of governments and industry to create markets for some of these technologies. That's the third. Coordinated capital. So when you look at the traditional technology commercialization, there are many gaps. I'm going to go through it. Through entities such as Breakthrough Energy, they're bringing private money, government money, philanthropy money, and they're putting it into the full commercialization chain from lab to first of a kind pilot. A lot of these projects and technologies fail there. I'm going to talk about that. Sustainable finance and regulatory reporting. Why is that crucial? Because if we want to bring the real money, which is debt and capital market financing, we got to give those financial institutions the taxonomy and the regulatory framework so they can direct their money into the right place. Innovation and technology, we're seeing these technologies are coming up, but importantly, we are also seeing establishment of hubs, hydrogen hubs, CCUS hubs. What is important about them, they are leveraging infrastructure and bringing suppliers and those that need these technologies together. They're becoming a platform for those that need to be around the table together. But what I considered the most transformative of this was what happened through the Department of Energy, through issuance of what they call adoption readiness level framework. How many of you have heard about that? Okay, great, because this is the transformative one, and I'm going to tell you why. It took us 40 years to bring solar to market and make it price competitive with its carbon intensive sources. And even when we see today, solar has not realized its market potential for a variety of reasons. And I will get into that. So now, we don't have 40 years. We need to expedite. We need to scale a whole range of technologies and mobilize big industries. How are we going to do that? We need speed and scale. There is massive financing gap. And I've categorized the technology, those that are commercialized, those that are emerging, and those that hopefully when they come, like fusion, they could be transformative, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about category 2, technologies that are in the commercialization pipeline, but they're stuck and they're not scaling. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you have to remember, these technologies are not coming out by big corporations like Siemens and others. They are being piloted and scaled by entrepreneurial startups. I spend a big chunk of my time with teams that are coming out of Berkeley and Stanford and MIT and so on, catalytic production of chlorine, this and that. These are young, promising engineers that are developing the technology, but frankly, they lack understanding of risk management and how technology actually comes to market, okay? So reality is we need to rethink how we are bringing these technologies to market, because those that are bringing it are not gurus of technology commercialization. They are brilliant innovators coming out of lab. So this is something that many of you have seen in the traditional approach to technology commercialization. You start in the lab, research and development, and there are sources of funding from philanthropy, government grants, angel investors, individuals that really believe in the cause, but and some VCs that work, venture capitalists that work at that early stage. Now, when the technology has been fully demonstrated, that brings a different range of investors into that, which bring debt and capital market financing into that. And these are institutional investors, industries that want to invest in those things. There is this part in the middle where you actually have to take the technology from the lab into real world, and that is where everything fails, because these technologies are capital intensive, very risky, right? And nobody in the right frame of mind is going to put money into something that is so expensive and so risky. So how are we going to transform that part? How are we going to it? Now, one thing that I want to familiarize you, probably you all know, is first of a kind to nth of a kind pilots. And this is where first of a kind is a first pilot of a technology on the ground in real world. That's the hardest to finance. As the developer goes from first to second to third to fourth, their financing needs and their insurance needs change. So we have to think about how this is changing. Now, let's look at sort of the blended capital stack for these projects. So, I mentioned here that when you're in lab and, pilot, demo, government, catalytic, whatever, but you get to that first of a kind project and you see where tax equity and project finance is kicking in. And the question we asked ourselves with all those participants is the traditional approach to project finance properly addresses the challenges that we have to face? And the answer is no. And the reason for that is, in the traditional project finance, you go and select the site, you work with your EPC to design the project, you come to the insurer before financing and say, well, what can you insure? And then you go for investment. And that insurer covers a lot of things for construction, for operations, whatever. Reality is, let me give you one example. If this is a renewable project designed for this place where hail is going to be increasing, and you haven't factored those risks by the time you get to your financier, the insurer is going to say, no, sorry, This is not designed for that. So this is why one of the things that we have done as part of our work is finding ways to get the risk engineering teams of insurers who are designed to beat the engineering teams, to find faults with the engineering design into these projects from early stage. So now I have 8 minutes and I want to focus on this. Remember I said, I think one of the most transformative things that happened in the last essentially 2 years is Department of Energy came up with a framework that said, look, the traditional technology commercialization, which uses technology readiness level framework, which came out of NASA, only focuses on technological maturity. But hey, look at the 17 category of risks, forget about the 18th, that needs to be in place for a technology to be market ready. So here we go. First one is about delivered cost. This is the traditional discussion. The technology, oops, I have to learn how to use this properly. Delivered cost, so technology has to be cheaper than its counterpart. Second one is functional performance of technology, whatever. These are market acceptance, resource maturity, and license to operate is what they put on the plate. That better, before the technology is ready to come to market, we have worked out the off-takers and the fact that there is a market, what's the size of that market, what is the downstream value chain, the fact that we have a technology, do we have everything we need to actually make it fully operational? Resource maturity, do we have the right equipment and supply chain? Do we have materials that we need? Do we have the right workforce? Are we training them? Do we have the infrastructure? Do we have the project management infrastructure from legal and others? And finally, something that I think is very close to many of your hearts in public policy is license to operate. For that technology, is the regulatory environment favorable? Is the policy environment developed? What about environmental safety? I didn't even start telling you about that. A lot of these technologies have very potentially very deep environmental footprint, starting from mining critical materials, right? And then what about the community's perception? Who wants to have carbon storage in their backyard? Okay? And then permitting and siting. Nobody was thinking about these things in that holistic way. Because if you want to be ready and expedite scale deployment, a lot of these things has to be sorted out before we are ready to go and deploy at scale. And a lot of those things was what held back solar to start. And then, of course, we come along and say, oh, excuse me, we have one little more thing to add here, that if a full suite of insurance solutions are not available for this technology, from construction to operation to decommissioning, et cetera, it's going to hold back. And insurability is a tough thing. It is very complex, and there are 9 critical parameters that are needed to assess insurability of a technology. For example, is there systemic risk across these projects? You know, for example, imagine wind turbines, the systemic risk that we saw in the wind turbine that went and led to redesign, right? Manageable maximum possible loss. If you know, these technologies are designed so with what event you have a catastrophic failure, which is very expensive, insurance industry cannot insure it alone. We need to, first of all, manage that risk through risk mitigation. And maybe, for example, in case of nuclear, we may come up with public-private solutions for ensuring that. Large number of exposure. If you have 10 cars in the whole community, it's going to be very hard to insure those because, you know, it's a very small pool. Do we have enough projects across this technology where we can transfer that risk? Those things, ladies and gentlemen, take time to analyze. So as a result, what we recommended is bring risk engineering teams of insurance companies into climate tech projects from first-of-a-kind pilots. And we demonstrated 5 benefits by engaging insurers early. Data and transparency. We can start collecting data on the operations of this technology and create transparency. We can start building relationship in these complex projects that currently are not in place. We can use sort of the projects that even they are short, at least to build a minimal pool of insurance in the early stages. Now, once the technology is demonstrating, there are many projects, insurance companies are going to take a lot of that risk, but till we get there, you know, we can create diversification. Scope what insurance products are going to be needed, and then risk management standards. So let's make sure we learn project by project, we share it, we come up with the standards, so as we're going to replicate, we're not going to make the same mistakes, right? That's risk mitigation of the projects. So as part of this, we took the adoption readiness level framework, and we designed what we call insurability readiness framework, which is 7 categories of risk from insurance lens with a deep questionnaire about what fits under each of it, that anyone that's developing any of these big technologies from first-of-a-kind project has to have under their wing. Not that they're going to manage it, but they need to know that these are the range of type of risks that are going to come their way. So from that first project design, start being mindful, start collecting data, start working with risk experts. So this has been critical for informing the conversations between project developers and financiers and US government with insurance industry. Very importantly, we have pinpointed for at least 2 technologies risks that are going to hold back the scaling of the technologies. By the way, this is like a sample. This is like the technology risk, and then we have mapped it over project finance. Those are critical questions, and this is just like a 10th of that taxonomy. And then sort of risk engineers in insurance industry and project developers can start talking about what is it that they need to be mindful in their project design from very, very early stage and start building their databases. This is an example of, so imagine you start that and you start collecting data and you start mitigating those risks, find ways, you start looking at efficacy of these risk management. Ultimately, you got to build standards. This is an example of what made offshore wind enabled. This started by the insurance industry. They brought together manufacturers and all the standard setting bodies. It took 3 years to develop codes of practice for offshore wind. In other words, every project that's going to be built offshore better be built on this if they want to secure insurance quickly. That led a lot of discussions with manufacturers, what kind of equipment we want, under what kind of conditions, et cetera. So that ranged up. Just to sort of seal the deal in the next 2 minutes, we brought top experts who are running big green hydrogen projects. And we run deep technical workshops with project developers, oil and gas companies, and et cetera on carbon capture, utilization, storage. And through the course of this project, we identify those risks that if it's not managed, will always hold back these technologies. I don't have time to go over it, but that's a starting point in the industry. Not insurance, in the industry of green hydrogen, in the industry of carbon capture, that yes, a lot of these risks are going to be insurable, don't worry, but there are those that will not be insured by the commercial market. And for these reasons, let's see how we can solve them. And I'm very happy to say that when we finish phase 1 of this project, which is April, we are already on the ground implementing with US Department of Energy. We are bringing together platforms of insurers, risk engineers, with off-takers, project developers around several high priority projects for United States. And this is where US government says, I will take the risk that nobody's willing to take. Breakthrough is coming and say, okay, I'll take the next range of risks that nobody's going to take. And what is insurers are doing, helping the framing with the tools that we use, okay? Now, the second one, which I'm very proud of, US Department of Energy put us in touch with the Clean Energy Ministerial, you all know them, and the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative. So we are working with 10 largest oil and gas companies and the platform of ministerial around the elephant in the room, ensuring the long-term durability of carbon, of geological storage of carbon. Insurance industry became very clear that this, we call it a super catastrophic risk. If 40 years from now, carbon is released from this storage site. So that started a whole conversation with government so that we are bringing the expertise of oil and gas companies, insurance companies in risk framing and modeling and others. And we are now talking about, well, what would it take not only to ensure the operational side as the world wants to scale, but also the storage side. So those are some of the discussions. We have a lot of stuff on our plate. My next move is to look at market adoption, industries that need to adopt these, how their insurance needs are going to evolve. Insurance needs, very importantly, on bankability. So if we bring debt and capital market financing, how insurance needs to back debt financing. So sitting with the banks, dynamics of insurance markets haven't been designed for intervening into pre-commercialization stages, so we need to change that. And last, but the most important, environmental risk of the value chain and supply chain of these technologies, because let's get on those environmental policies, not for reactive and dealing with crisis, but becoming preventive. So with that, I stop. This presentation also has annexes. There are a lot of reports that I have drawn from my work that if it interests you, you can download and look at. Thank you so much for your attention.
Lot to absorb there, so I'm sure we'll have some questions. There's people roaming with microphones. I was going to take the first question, but I see one hand already go up, so let's go directly to the audience.
This is Lo from CE. So it's very insightful talks. So my question is about like you have a figure show the economic loss with like the uninsurance and the insurance. So I mean like whether with or without the insurance, the economic cost of loss still be there. So I believe there must be some like implicit benefits from insurance, which can reduce like the total social economic loss. And how do you evaluate it and how do you quantify it? Which means like you can say insurance is really helpful for the whole society, which can reduce our social cost. And also, I mean, can you compare it to like if you consider like the total cost from customers, like the maybe it may be higher than the economic loss, because otherwise the insurance company cannot be profitable. So how do you consider the implicit benefits and compare to the maybe extra cost from customers in a society?
So excellent. So I try to relate that when you look at economic costs, first of all, they are incomplete. They don't consider, you know, what the world has measured as economic cost of extreme weather event are just direct cost of destruction or damage. They have not considered a lot of other things like opportunity cost, that is loss. So I actually have, I didn't show it here. I have a table that talks about direct and indirect costs, and those indirect costs probably amounts to a lot more. But current, you know, databases that are available do not consider those. So number one, we need to enhance modeling of sort of indirect risks and the compounding risks. That's the first point. Second point is there are studies that show that in regions that insurance has penetrated, availability and accessibility of insurance has been realized even for 30–40% of the community. Those communities go back to normalcy a lot faster than those that don't have insurance, because the community gets back to start rebuilding. That, in fact, one of the jokes in the insurance industry is the one that really benefits the most out of it is the development community, because they even position themselves with early warnings of insurers in the location, so they are well stocked, insurance pays, they go and build. So economic activity and development in regions where insurance has penetrated has been demonstrated, and there are a number of papers and reports. I didn't get into that, but maybe in my next presentation, I'm going to show some numbers. Yet those regions in particularly developing economies that don't have penetration of insurance for a whole range of reasons, they go deeper and deeper into poverty, right? They cannot build and so on. So, and these are the issues. So in a nutshell, insurance as a solution builds economic and financial resilience and enables that development as opposed to falling into that. But the big challenge is that even if it's available in developed economy and affordable, it's not being utilized for a lot of misunderstandings and mistrust and so on. But you have a very important point, and these studies have been done, but I think there is so much room to demonstrate the benefits and the challenges. So if you want to take that on in your research, I think the insurance industry itself will appreciate it a lot. Thank you.
The lady with the glasses.
Hello, very nice talk. My name is Anita. I'm also a civil engineer and materials engineer as well. I work on sustainable cement. And I think from my perspective, there is always a difference between what the risk actually is and the perceived risk, right? People always think for sustainable cement, obviously the construction industry is extremely risk averse because it's associated with human lives and stuff like that. But we also see buildings like the Surfside condo in Florida collapsing, right? That's built with traditional cement. So it doesn't mean that traditional concrete has no risks. So how do you kind of like mitigate the gap between the perceived risk and the actual risk? And how can we as engineers kind of help bridge that?
This is one of the biggest issues that really is being discussed at the CEO level. It's perception of the risk versus the actual risk. Take EVs, electric vehicles. Nobody wants, because they think Tesla is going to blow up. I mean, simple as that, right? Tesla is going to blow up. They're more, sometimes even most educated people say that. So at least within the insurance industry, I skipped over some slides. There is significant amount of research that's going into creating evidence-based research so that the risk can be properly and based on evidence communicated with homeowners, governments, and others. Because otherwise, this is one of the things that is biggest challenge for the industry, perceived versus the actual risk. And you're working at the forefront of a new technology. Even for a lot of known risk, there is still misconception about what that risk is. So it's a very big thing. The only solution that we've come up with is evidence-based research, is training of those people that interface with the general public. So for example, when it comes to flood and wildfire risk of your home, insurance industry has developed, there are examples of it, these training programs for home inspectors, insurance brokers, because as a homeowner, I actually have to talk to my home inspector. I have to talk to my home insurance. So with facts, to give them the facts, right? But we need to do as a society, particularly in a world where we are going to be so transformative towards all these new ways of doing business, I think we need to do a lot more than that, more of that.
Sam at the back.
Hi, thanks for the wonderful talk. Sam Chakrabarty here, a researcher here at the Endlinger Center. I'm wondering that pertaining to the winter freeze that happened in Texas back in February 2021, and something that's gone on ever since, at least the late 80s. What are your thoughts, if any, as to translate some of these mechanisms that you have talked about to create like weatherization of the grid or capacity market in the context of ERCOT, like some dialogue with PUCT, Texas legislature, or something else?
Excellent question. So one of the failures of our society is that it requires a massive crisis for the government, the legislature, the regulators, and others who are actually driving the show to mobilize, right? And this, for example, happened when communities started to burn down. And, we see how states overnight, through the governors, the legislature, the financial regulators, started to mobilize because they're like, how am I going to deal with it? How am I going to build back? So I would say one incident that started mobilizing that dialogue was the extreme heat that happened in Europe in 2022, which coincided with the Ukraine, and then it coincided with rising inflation and others. All of a sudden, Europe came into this risk of, supply and demand for energy. And that expedited that conversation, not only in Europe, but started others thinking about energy security. If you look at when all these critical material national strategies came out, it was just at the end of that. So they started thinking about quick fixes, but then they started thinking about the long-term fixes, long-term solutions, and so on. So I would say, sadly, that's the human tragedy that we need to see. I always said, El Nino is my best friend. When I came out of my degree, I got lost. I didn't know what I'm going to do. I didn't want to go into academics, but I came out at a time where nobody even believed in climate change. This was 1997. And what I did is I took 2 years of a fellowship at Harvard Business School, and I just did cold calls to CEOs in energy, agribusiness, finance, and insurance. Oh, I'm Dr. Golnaraghi, da, 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 da. Can I talk to you about some emerging technologies out of field of climate? Because that can help you with your risk management. I got 17 sessions, half-hour sessions. And out of the 70, only one entity told me, yes, this is interesting. In my presentation, based on our technologies, we had forecasted the 1997-98 El Nino. Nobody knew about what El Nino is then, right? And I also what could have happened in terms of disruptions in California, et cetera, et cetera. And then, thank God it happened. Isn't that a shame that I say thank God it happened? Because that's the only way you can wake up people. And then I got 15 calls back. What? How did you know? Based on what? And then that was, I would say, again, we get the same thing with tsunami of Indian Ocean. I was part of a team that built the global tsunami warning system. We should have started that years ago before the 2004 tsunami happened, because we had all the technology, we had all the facilities, we had everything. But then scientists went to all these ring of fire countries, sort of told them, look, this is going to happen. At some point, we can't say it's next year, the year after, but it will happen. And then once it happened, in 2 years, ladies and gentlemen, we convened, coordinated, and built the global tsunami warning system. By 2007, every country would get the alerts for their coastal region if a tsunami was imminent. Now, they had to, but so we are a reactive society. And I think we need to change that to become more proactive. And, I guess somebody told me, until you don't get to that extreme crisis, things won't transform. But let's hope it's not that, because I think we have a lot of work to do and a lot of things that we have to manage. But we have got to keep at it.
Time for one more. I think it's going to be.
Thank you, Doctor. My name is Mohammed. I'm over with the School of Public and International Affairs. I wanted to ask, given your presentation, I understood that the ideal is that insurance, whether it's commercial or private insurance, reflects the risks, the increasing risks due to climate change. And yet we see that some states, some local governments are stepping in. Maybe they're not publishing all of the risks that their local environmental agencies collect. Maybe they're providing insurance at their own, on their own, at a cost to future taxpayers if they are taking out debt to do so. Do you see this, and does the Geneva Association see this as maybe slowing down progress to the ideal future where insurers actually do reflect the increased risks from climate change? Or is this just something that's affecting maybe homeowners and maybe local and public finances, but it's not affecting commercial insurance risk assessments?
Excellent question. Let me reframe it. I would say, yes, there is a lot of the self-insurance that's going on, you know, big homes, expensive homes in coastal zones, you know, maybe it gets destroyed, there is no insurance, they build it back, they take it upon themselves. I would say that at the local government, I think there is a dearth of risk information because of capacities of local governments and because of the business model of local government. The more I build, the more I can collect property tax. That's a source of income. So I would say what you're talking about, situations when there is government insurance or self-insurance, is it prominent enough? Whatever. What is happening is that we're not bothered by that language because ultimately, depending on level of risk, whether it's very high, it has to be self-insured or if you want to live there. Remember, Government of Canada 4 years ago told homeowners in Quebec and in Ontario, you've been flooded 3 times in the last 5 years. I'm not going to give you post-disaster aid. I'll buy you out for $200,000. That's not necessarily the best solution because they're taking taxpayer money from one place and paying out for that. And or you can leave or you can build on your own, but you're on your own, right? You know, that's one of the solutions. There are land zoning and not allowing to build in certain areas. But there is that area where, you know, still commercial insurance find the risk too high and you know, government and commercial insurance are trying to find out pools, national, you know, the sort of insurance pools, whatever. But the debate is even changing that let's get those that know what to do it best. And the role of government at local, state, and federal is to invest in risk mitigation, risk reduction, and risk prevention. That's the conversation I'm coming from. And the fact that everybody plays a role. So let me give you an example, if I may, just 1 minute. Can I do that? So forest fires, okay? Insurance industry launched this center called Institute for Business and Home Safety. This was all over the news in the United States, that as a single family homeowner in a high risk region, take 5 feet around your home and clear it from anything that's flammable. But you have to do it on everybody else in the neighborhood. And that's going to reduce risk of wildfires to your immediate community. And these are demonstrated, right? So now the reality is homeowners have a responsibility and they can take simple measures. These are not, you know, 50,000 retrofits. Community has a role to play. So the conversation is going towards risk reduction and risk prevention to actually keep insurance available and affordable, right? So let's see how it evolves. But that conversation has evolved from you bad guys to we need you. What can we do to bring you back to the market in the course of 1 year? And that's going to evolve further. So.
Okay, before we wrap, I'm going to give you some homework. This is your 2026 project.